Okay, thank you for joining me this afternoon. This is ArcGIS Enterprise, an introduction. If you are not sure if you should be here, I will set the stage of what this is going to be. So ArcGIS Enterprise is by its very nature a technical product. This is not a technical presentation, but it's hard to completely avoid being technical. Basically what this presentation does is gives you the foundation that all the other ArcGIS Enterprise sessions are going to assume you have. So if you go into another enterprise session, if the presenter's feeling really nice, they will maybe define some of this, but otherwise they'll assume you already know. So this is a good place to be if you don't know. Okay, let's get started. So what is ArcGIS Enterprise? Well, it's server software that runs an infrastructure that you control. So you get to decide if you want to put it in the cloud, if you want it to be running on your laptop, if you want it to be running on a VM somewhere. It's up to you. You get to control that. ArcGIS Enterprise gives you advanced analytics like image analysis and big data analysis, the ability to work with IoT data and sensors. It also gives you the ArcGIS Enterprise portal, which delivers Web GIS within your organization. So now people don't have to have magic spatial seeing eyes to magically decode REST services. They have web maps and layers right there at their fingertips, ready to use. So this next slide will say before you get started, but this is actually how you get started. So think about ArcGIS Enterprise to break it down. If you ever start getting confused, just remember 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now we'll break down what that means. So 5, this is the number of server roles that you have within ArcGIS Enterprise. The server roles control what you can do with the software. It's what happens out of the box. The server roles of ArcGIS Enterprise are GIS server, image server, Geo Event, Business Analyst, and Geoanalytics. So GIS server is what does most of your GIS. How many people have an ArcGIS server today? Good, you're in the right place. GIS server is the server role that does that. So if you have a standalone server today and you upgrade to ArcGIS Enterprise, that license that you're going to apply will say that it's a GIS server license. That's what it is. Okay, how many people have image extensions today? A few people. Well, so whenever you upgrade to ArcGIS Enterprise, image extensions will automatically become cores of image server. They will also include the ability for you to deploy raster analytics, which allows you to use distributed analysis and computation to do much larger raster analysis jobs in much shorter amount of times. Now, we'll do Geo Event, and then I'll tell you something cool about these. How many people have a Geo Event extension today? A few people. Okay, Geo Event is what controls real-time IoT. That's how you work with that. Both Geo Event and Image Server used to be extensions. So in the old ArcGIS server world, there was only one server, and then there were extensions, and you just added extensions on. And if you ever needed to get bigger, you needed more capacity, you were dealing with more data, or you had more people demanding to be able to use it, you had to scale both. You had to buy more cores of GIS server and more cores of your extension. So even if all you needed was the extra cores of image server or image extension, you still had to buy extra cores of GIS server. But in the ArcGIS Enterprise world of doing things, you don't have to do that. So you can have 16 cores of image server and just 4 cores of GIS. You can have some crazy amount of geoanalytics cores if you want. 168 cores, sure, why not? And still only have 4 cores of GIS because everything is separate. Now, extensions still exist. We have lots of industry-specific extensions, and the majority of those today, I think really all of them today, apply on top of GIS server. So you can still apply those. Any true extensions that come out of Esri Professional Services, you would still apply just like you did in the past. Server extension, so server object extenders, server object interceptors, these are ways you can customize what your GIS server can do. Those still exist, and you put them on your GIS server. But now that we have all of these server roles, we've opened the door to some new opportunities for us. So maybe in the future you'll see specific image server extensions or geoanalytics extensions or geo-event. As we grow and now we've shaped this, there's a lot of options there. Or the ability to apply SOEs and SOIs on top of other server roles. So there's a lot of cool things that could be on the road ahead for us. But how do you get a server role? Well, this is the license file. And unlike the old world where there was one GIS server, each of these server roles does different things. So you can't necessarily publish a feature layer to each server role. So you want to pay attention to the ArcGIS Enterprise functionality matrix. It will tell you the types of data you can host with the service, the types of services you can create, what the general capabilities are, and that is all available online. Now, one question I get all the time is, well, my IT department told me I have 3 machines, but I want all of this stuff, so what do I do? That is okay. You can combine multiple server roles on a single piece of infrastructure or a single server site. The thing to keep in mind is you don't, just because you can, like nothing in the technology will block you from doing this. Doesn't mean you necessarily should. So things like geoanalytics and raster analytics that distribute the workload and distribute the analytics consume all resources that you give to it. So if that's one machine, it's going to consume every single core while it's doing its work. If you give it a server site, well, it's going to consume all the cores in that site if it has the chance and if it needs them. So for those things, it's not that you can't, but really think about how you're using this. So if you tightly control who's going to be running these analyses and when, you may be fine. You may experience absolutely no problem. But if you're going to open up the ability to do distributed analytics to a broader group of people, you may want to consider separating that out and putting it on different infrastructure. That way, while you're running these distributed jobs, you're not choking out the heart of your GIS, your servers, your GIS server. And any of these roles can be deployed on physical machines or in the cloud. It's up to you. You can even mix it up, but we, in general, don't recommend that. And the reason for that is that you introduce latency when you do that. The closer you can keep things together, the faster they're going to work, the better the experience you're going to have. Okay, so that was 5. We had 5 server roles. Now we're at 4. There are 4 software components with ArcGIS Enterprise, but don't panic. So these software components are ArcGIS Server, which almost everyone in here raised their hand, they have this today. Portal for ArcGIS has been a long time part of the ArcGIS Server family, but prior to ArcGIS Enterprise, it was a, well, if you want. Now with ArcGIS Enterprise, we're really saying it's not so much a want, it's a need. It's a necessary piece of the puzzle. Then there's ArcGIS Data Store. Of all the components, most recently, I get the most questions about ArcGIS Data Store. And I think the reason is a lot of people wonder, well, if there is an ArcGIS Data Store, what is happening with enterprise geodatabases? Do they go away? Do I need to put all my data on this thing? And the answer is no, you do not need to move all of your data to the ArcGIS Data Store. What the ArcGIS Data Store is designed to do is store hosted content. So picture it, you have someone, maybe it's the CEO of your organization, and he's trying out using the map viewer in the portal, he's found some data, he's trying to run an analysis. Do you want him to try to figure out how to access an enterprise geodatabase right then and there? Probably not. You just want it to work for him. And that's what the ArcGIS Data Store is designed to do, is it's designed to store the data that comes out of analysis that is run in the portal and data that's copied in. So let's assume that same CEO has a great CSV file that he just needs to see on a map. He drags it in. Well, that data needs to live somewhere. It lives in the ArcGIS Data Store. The last component is the ArcGIS Web Adapter. And the Web Adapter is what enables web tier authentication, which will give you single sign-on. Lots of organizations are all about single sign-on. And for good reason, it's very convenient for users to use the same credentials that they logged onto their computer with to log into the portal. And that's what Web Adapter allows you to do. It also, whenever you deploy a server site, it could be just one machine. And that's perfectly fine. But for a lot of organizations, it's not just one machine, it's actually a group of machines. And for IT organizations, they'll call this clustering. But unfortunately for Esri, we've burnt that word meaning something else. So what we call it is a site. So we have a multi-machine site. And what happens sometimes, if we don't watch our machines, one of these machines could go down. Things happen. Maybe it ran out of memory and it crashed. Well, if that were to happen, you don't want your users to log in and be directed to that machine. They would think your system's broken. Maybe they never log on and use it again. Hopefully not. But what the web adapter will do is it'll automatically act as a load balancer if you have it in front of a multi-machine site. Meaning if one machine goes down, it'll simply direct people to the other 2 machines if you had a 3-machine site. And that gives you time to go in and triage the situation. So if you have a product like ArcGIS Monitor, that should hopefully be providing some early alerting, but if you didn't pay attention to the alerts, it should then tell you what the problem is. So I believe there are some sessions on Monitor. Check them out if managing this is going to be a big part of your role. So let's just sum it up real quick. ArcGIS Server is what serves the content and powers your analysis. The portal is what enables Web GIS. The data store is what stores hosted content, and remember, it does not replace enterprise geodatabases. And lastly, the web adapter enables single sign-on and acts as a load balancer in your machines. All right. So now we have these 4 software components, but it's not enough to simply download them onto our machine. We need to configure them together. And this base configuration is called the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. And it looks something like this. Now, this is a logical architecture diagram, meaning that I'm not telling you the number of machines, I'm not telling you where your firewall should go, I'm not telling you how any of this has to be deployed, if it's in the cloud, if it's on Windows or Linux. All I'm telling you is how these things connect. So each of your portal and your server should have their own web adapter. And the reason for that is so that you are for sure directing the network traffic to the right component. If you had one web adapter and 2 different destinations, it would be possible that people might end up at an unexpected destination, which we never want. We want to know exactly where our users will go, and we want to make sure they'll get there. Having 2 different web adapters enables us to do this without any concern. Then you have the ArcGIS data store, and starting at 10.6.1, we have started to enforce that the data store must be the registered managed database for your GIS server that is in your base deployment. So what that means is that if you go into or edit settings in your portal and you click on that servers tab, if you have an enterprise geodatabase acting as the registered managed data store today, your portal is going to start yelling at you when you upgrade to 10.6.1. And so that, if you start seeing that message, if you're like me and you're just like, click, well, whatever, and then you're like, wait, things are not working the same. That was what the error was. We have lots of documentation that describes this. If you are coming from the standalone server world, keep in mind there's a term you might not have heard before, and it's called the hosting server. And so let's dig a little into that. So the hosting server is this server that serves the hosted content. It's not a server role, it's just a designation. Literally, you go into your edit settings in your portal, there will be a drop-down menu that lists all the servers you've federated, and you just pick one that has a GIS server license. It won't let you pick anything else, and that becomes your hosting server. And this is what is going to take over whenever it needs to drive an analysis in the portal for a standard analysis tool. Obviously, geoanalytic servers, which runs geoanalysis jobs, and image server runs raster analysis if you enable those things. So it creates and stores the hosted, it does, the hosted services. Some of the requirements, what does it need to be? Well, it needs to be a GIS server. The ArcGIS data store must be the registered managed database, and you must have designated it as the hosting server. So if you do the first 2 steps, but you never do the third, you don't have a hosting server yet. You have to do all 3. And you will only have one hosting server in your entire ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. Now, you may have noticed that we have this concept of an image hosting server. So that's something new, but that is a little bit different, and you only need that if you're running raster analytics. So don't let that throw you off as you're setting up your deployment. You don't need an image hosting server unless you plan on doing raster analytics. And in that case, it's serving the same purpose as this, but just is dedicated to your imagery. So another concept that you'll hear in the base deployment is the idea of federation. So a little earlier I said any servers that have been federated. Now if you come from an IT background, your mind might immediately go to identity federation. And this is kind of related, but not really. It's mostly just a trust relationship between your portal and your server. This is what allows ArcGIS Enterprise to function as one seamless unit. Everything works together because it has all been federated. As far as the software knows, it's one thing. But we all know it's actually 4 things. And that's important because if anything goes wrong, we need to be aware about what components are behind the scenes, what they're doing, so we can start to diagnose those issues and triage them more quickly if they were to arise. So once a server is federated with a portal, the biggest change is that security is now set at the portal. This means if anyone wants to access secured content, meaning that you did not share it with everyone and enable anonymous access, they need an identity. But identities are now much easier to come by in ArcGIS Enterprise because viewers are included at no cost. You can give anyone in your organization a viewer account. They can view information. You can add as many as you want. And there's lots of ways that you can make that such an easy process so that when users log on, you're automatically creating viewer accounts for them and you take that burden off of you. Now, once you federate, the tip is don't unfederate. Now, we've said this for a long time, but people still try it. In fact, earlier this year, I was at a conference and I had a user tell me, you know, I saw in the documentation it said don't unfederate, but it didn't tell me why, so I wanted to know what would happen. And I said, well, how did it go for you? And he said, well, it got really weird. Luckily, he was able to recover things. But the reason that we tell you why, in case anyone has to push the big red button that says don't do it, you're like, well, maybe. Unfederating can cause breaking changes, and it can cause catastrophic damage to your deployment, especially if what you're unfederating is the hosting server. So don't do it. If you ever call someone and they say, hey, yeah, just unfederate and then we'll refed, no, say no. We don't want to do that. Okay, so we talked about the 5 server roles and we talked about the base deployment. But how do you connect all this together? Like, how do you get these things to work together? And this is probably the most simplified architecture diagram ever. There you go. Now, it will take a few more steps than that, but they're not that difficult. But the idea that you should keep in mind is that all of these server roles are federated with your portal. So whenever you're doing things, think about how your base deployment plays a role in this. For example, if you want to implement GeoAnalytics server, you'll need to have what's called the spatiotemporal data store, and I'll get to that in just a second. Well, if you have this thing, where does it go? You know that GeoAnalytics needs it, so maybe it goes with that. No, it goes with your base deployment. The server roles connect to your base deployment. Data stores are registered at the base deployment. But speaking of data, there's an important concept to keep in mind within ArcGIS Enterprise, and it's this idea of hosted content or referenced content. So hosted content we've talked about a lot today. It's data that's copied to the server either because someone brought it in or because they ran analysis. And referenced data is what you're all familiar with today. It's what's living in your enterprise geodatabases. You create a connection, you say, okay, we're all set up here. But there's something important to keep in mind here. In ArcGIS Enterprise, whether you share from ArcMap or from Pro, when you create a layer, you create a service. It happens automatically, almost instantly. If you do it the other way around, then it'll happen the other way. If you publish the service, it'll create the layer automatically. So you're getting both. Now, behind the scenes, you still have your data. Now, in the case of hosted data, this is that data that's been copied into the server. If I delete my layer in the portal, maybe I just want to clean things up, it'll automatically delete my service. Great, I don't have to worry about that anymore, more room on my server. It'll also automatically delete my data. So this is why it's important to not just blindly put everything in the ArcGIS data store. Now in the case of reference data, so this is your enterprise geodatabase data. If I delete the layer, great, layer's gone. And starting at 10.6.1, service is gone too. So if any of you were using an earlier version of Enterprise and noticed that you were having services be orphaned, that's been resolved. Your services will no longer be orphaned. But what about the data? We do not touch your data. Your data is right there. It's ready for you the next time you need it. We never touch your registered data. So that's something to keep in mind when you think about how you're using hosted data versus reference data. And it's one of the reasons why, if you read the latest white paper that we've put out, which is all about data stores, you'll see that we recommend that reference data is for your more authoritative content. It's not that authoritative content can't be hosted. It's just that most of the time when it's authoritative, we want to take all means possible to protect it from being deleted. And that's the only reason why. Okay, so we had 5 was server roles, 4 was software components, and now we're at 3. So I mentioned the spatiotemporal big data store, and that is part of the ArcGIS data store. The ArcGIS data store actually has 3 different ways that it can be configured, because, why not? Now, each data store type is designed to work with a certain type of data. And because if you think about this as technologists, you can think about that, yes, of course, there are certain data structures that just work better. Like big data works a lot, is much faster and more responsive if I use it in an unstructured format, a NoSQL kind of approach. Whereas relational data is much easier to deal with if I can use SQL to query it. So the relational data store is what you're going to use probably for most everything. But if you're working with 3D data, you will use the tile cache data store. Now, if you're wondering, why, Esri, did you call this the tile cache data store if it's for 3D? Well, that's because when we first envisioned this data store, the team that built it had grand ideas that it was going to hold all sorts of tile caches, not just 3D ones. But as it turned out, we never acted on that. Maybe in the future we will. But just don't let the name throw you. The tile cache data store is for your 3D content. And when we configure a base deployment, if you look at any of the materials we have online, if you take a training course, you're going to notice that we tell you that you need both of these in your base deployment. Now it's up to you. You can put them on the same machine or you can split them apart. But if in doubt, split them out. That is the rule. And here's why. If you put these 2 things together, untangling them later on is quite complicated. Professional services has informed me it's basically impossible and we should never ever let anyone combine anything. But that's not practical because realistically, not everyone is always doing things in 3D. Some organizations actually never use 3D, but we want to have the option there. Maybe you get 3D data set, or maybe you have 2D data that you would like to extrude and save. So it's useful to have both there. It's what completes the experience. So in those cases, maybe you combine, but always use caution. And like I said, if in doubt, split them out. The last data store type is optional. If you're using geoanalytics, you're going to need the spatiotemporal big data store. If you're using GeoEvent and you would like to archive that wonderful real-time data that is streaming through that server, use the spatiotemporal big data store. It shards this data up into all the different nodes that you have, and it will make it easier to recall and find this information. It also automatically builds in a certain degree of redundancy. So we talked about that you need those 2. Now, with the spatiotemporal big data store, it's important to think about it just like we do anything else that's distributed. Distributed things at this stage in technology want to take all the resources that they need. They're very greedy. So they will take all of the resources that they have. So if you put a spatiotemporal big data store with your same relational data store, with your same tile cache, the software will warn you, but you can choose to just proceed on through that if you like. But what you risk is that you're going to choke out your entire relational and tile cache data store with this spatiotemporal data. And so that's why we always recommend separate this out. Put it on its own infrastructure. Okay, what about the data? What kind of data can we bring to ArcGIS Enterprise? Well, the answer is basically anything. You can bring almost anything to ArcGIS Enterprise, and if there's something you can't bring that you need to bring, let us know. Reach out to whoever your Esri contact is, and if you don't know your Esri contact, then get on GeoNet and let us know there. We have a customer advocacy lead who is quite the GeoNet watcher. He doesn't always respond. He watches in silence. He doesn't want to weird anyone out. We do respond sometimes, and it's really funny because we'll try to be helpful, and users will say, no, that's not right. We're like, product manager. And they're like, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. But do feel free to go onto GeoNet. But we can bring in any data. I mean, if you look at the list of the item types that can go into Portal, it's about 80 or 90 items long at least, last time I checked. Now, with all this data you bring in, do you need to put it all in the ArcGIS data store? Yeah, that's correct. No, you do not. We do not need you to put all this data in the data store. In fact, your enterprise geodatabases do a fantastic job at letting you do versioning and all those things that you want to do, and we have no plans to make the ArcGIS data store do that. Plus, the ArcGIS data store is managed by the system, meaning that to you it's basically a black box. So for people who don't have DBAs in their organization, this might be amazing. You don't have to be a DBA, and great. It just works. But if you are or have or work with DBAs, this may be the most frustrating part of the software to you. Why can't I break in there? I see it's Postgres. I'm just gonna add just a little. When people break into these black box components, that is the #1 cause of tech support cases. Almost all of the time, they say, oh no, nothing happened. I just added one thing. We know you are all so smart and can figure out how to get in there or know someone who can. But the problem is when you tinker with the black box, things can go wrong. So that's why you have your enterprise geodatabases for all the tinkering you need to do. We are, however, looking at ways that we can start to bridge the gap so that you have more control over your ArcGIS data store without having to introduce an unnecessary burden on the people who don't have the luxury of DBAs. So stay tuned for that. If you have thoughts, feedback, ideas, do let us know. Okay, so when you're registering your data, you can register that with your ArcGIS Enterprise. The data then lives where it's at. So if you update that data, it reflects right in the enterprise. And if somebody were to use it in a map or an app, they would be seeing your updates, and it's great. You don't need a separate copy. So that's fantastic. When you're publishing from Pro or from ArcMap for that matter, the data that you have, so say you've registered your data with your hosting server, fantastic, but now you added another server site. You perhaps said, okay, my hosting server is just gonna be a hosting server, and I'm gonna have a GIS server that's dedicated to just mapping and visualization. Great. You want to publish data to that. You want to reference the data. If you want to reference data, it needs to be registered with the server that you're publishing to, which may mean that you will register the same data with multiple servers. You can also choose to reference all of your data just to one server. It works both ways. But the point is, if you're sitting there and you're in Pro and you're trying to publish and that reference data button just isn't seeming to work, there's one of two things happening. Either one, you're trying to publish an item type that cannot use reference data. So for example, you're trying to publish vector tiles. Well, those are always hosted, so you'll never see the button for that. Or it could be that you haven't registered the data. Now, Pro nowadays will give you plenty of options to register it right then. You can register it from the analyzer. You can register it all over the place. So that's great. You can register more than just enterprise geodatabases as well. Big data file shares are one of my favorite. They basically are just for geoanalytics at this time, but I think they would be a great addition to just GIS server input. What they do is picture any data set that you have that's made up of lots of shapefiles or CSVs. It's essentially the same data, you just have a lot of it. So maybe it's every day, every month, every week, whatever. You're just getting another update to this data, and it's just saved up. You've been putting it in files, and they're just sitting there. Well, rather than having to go and try to reconstruct that in some massive data set, what you can do is you can create a big data file share. And the big data file share will take all of those files and will treat them as one input. You don't have to do any work. You can put it into analysis and it just works. For cloud stores, we've also recently added support for Alibaba and the Huawei cloud. So if you're working in those environments, you now have more options. And you can still register your folders, anything. You can register most anything. And you can do this from Pro or still from Server Manager if that's your preferred way. And we already talked about that you can do multiple data stores to the same server or same data to multiple servers. Okay, Living Atlas. Now, Bern showed a great example of all the new stuff that's coming in Living Atlas. And the Living Atlas is not just for ArcGIS Online. If you are using ArcGIS Enterprise, you can also access the Living Atlas, even if you are working completely disconnected. So we provide the SD files for a lot of Living Atlas content that you can download from my Esri. So if you're working in a secure environment, you can still get all of that boundary information that would save you a lot of time than trying to hunt it down. And it's right there ready for you to use. And if you are able to connect to the open internet, you have additional options. You can configure subscriber or premium content. Now keep in mind, as you can see in the little picture, premium content does require you to use credits. So you will need to enter your online credentials and it will use credits. And one of the most common questions we have is, can we track the individual enterprise users who are burning the credits? And unfortunately, the answer is no. It's only going to show up in that one online person. So we understand the use cases. The problem is that architecting that entire credit budgeting workflow in enterprise is challenging. One way that we are looking to address it is we're considering what we can do with the Python API to possibly allow some scripting, but it's still up in the air. We're very aware of the feedback of that. For many of you, you're working and you're trying to distribute the cost of your ArcGIS Enterprise across the departments based on how they're using it. So we know that we have talked to the developers and they looked at us like we were crazy. And not just like the kind of crazy you can work with, but like, they're like, no, you're crazy. Okay, so that was 5 server roles, 4 software components, and 3 data store types. Now down to 2. So there are 2 membership levels within ArcGIS Enterprise. And so basically every time you add someone to the portal and you give them an identity, you're giving them a level. And this is either going to be a level 1 or a level 2. Now prior to 10.5.1, then you only had level 2s. There was just 1 level of named user. And now you have 2 levels. Actually, prior to 10.5, sorry about that, there was just 1. Then we introduced the level 1, which was the viewer. And then just at the end of last year, the very end, basically the beginning of this year, that's when we announced viewers are now included. Have as many as you want. It makes sense. It resolves some of the issues that organizations were having where you're already paying to run the infrastructure. Why do you have to pay for someone just to view it? So the viewer is a read-only. They can only view content. They can view maps. They can view apps. If you're working in the web map viewer, the map viewer, they can even bring in their own data. They still can do that. They just can't save it. For a lot of people, this is fine. They didn't need to save it anyway. They just wanted to look at it. They can't create, own, or share content, which also means that they can't perform analysis because analysis writes content to your My Contents, and they can't do data enrichment because that also writes something to your output. Keep that in mind if you're building web app, like web app builders or anything where you're embedding widgets that run analysis. Your level 1s may not be able to do that. These are no cost. I've already mentioned that a lot, and I'm going to keep mentioning it because it's really great and I'm super excited about it. Okay, level 2 is everything else. It can do anything. Out of the box, we have 3 roles, a user, a publisher, and an admin, but you can customize these, adding and changing permissions as you need. So this is where we are today. This is what's true in 10.6, and it's what's going to be true in 10.6.1. But in the future, I may need to change what my 2 is in this presentation because we've been looking at, is there something else? Is there something between a 1 and the 2? Is there something beyond a 2? And so this is something that we're actively looking at. And so if you have feedback or thoughts of what would be the best solution for what you do, give us the feedback. I mean, that's what we're here to get, and go to the enterprise people in the showcase. This is a conversation that is really active right now, so now's a perfect time to give us feedback. And then ArcGIS Enterprise, for all of those 5 server roles, 4 software components, 3 data stores, and 2 membership levels, it's all just one thing. It's just one cohesive unit that's designed to create a seamless experience all across the board. Now, when you sit back and reflect on all of that stuff, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, how on earth is my organization going to make that happen? Like, this is crazy. And we have thought about this. And we have deployment automation tools to make getting started really easy, no matter what type of deployment that you're working with. So we have Builder, which is like a wizard that gives you that, let's just click next, 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 enter some information, go grab a cup of coffee, or get lunch, depending on how fast or slow you have either of those things. It'll take about an hour, usually a little less. Depends on your network speed. But it will set everything up. There's 2 things to keep in mind with Builder. It only does single machine deployments at this point in time, and you can't customize the name of your web adapters. Your web adapters will be /portal/server. Those are the things you're stuck with. But it's so easy, and you can use it to do an upgrade. So if you deploy using Builder, you can upgrade using Builder. In fact, if you deploy using any of these tools, you can upgrade using them. Now, granted, with AWS and Azure, if you go into your cloud deployments after deploying and change things up, upgrading with your same CloudFormation template or Cloud Builder can be challenging. So keep that in mind. But if you're an organization that's running with the defaults and you've left them there, you can easily use them to upgrade. And if you did customize things, it's just a matter of going in and making sure those same customizations carry over. So if you're deploying in the cloud, what are your options? Well, you can use AWS and Azure. We obviously recommend those if you're working in either of those cloud environments. So AWS, pick AWS. Azure, pick Azure. But if you're working in any other cloud, then you can use Chef or PowerShell. PowerShell is brand new. I've heard a few people have used it and really liked it. I've not tried it myself, but it's brand new. And if you're a Windows shop, you might really love this option. It gives you all the same functionality as Chef minus one thing. And that one thing is that it doesn't do Linux. But that makes sense because it's PowerShell. Okay, if you're deploying not in the cloud, so you're looking at physical or virtual machines, these are your tools. Builder will give you all-in-one machine deployments, single machine, that's what it is. Chef and PowerShell work for any deployment scenario. It will deploy any server role. You can distribute it. You can do HA. You can do disaster recovery. It won't wash your car, but it will do all of these other things, and it's really great. And what I love about Chef is that with Chef, when you look at it, people say, oh yeah, you're gonna use a Chef script. Chef scripts are just JSON. So if you work with JSON files, you can do Chef. It's pretty straightforward. And as you're creating your Chef run lists, you can add other things to it. So say you created a Python script that's going to customize out your portal, and it's automatically gonna create these groups. Just add it to the end of your run list, and so it'll go through, it'll deploy, it'll configure, and then it'll go ahead and apply whatever it is that your Python script is doing. So it just adds one more thing to that for you. So now let's look at the Web GIS. Web GIS is probably going to be where most people access and experience your GIS, because we don't usually send our end users to our server managers. They don't know what to do when they get there. It's alarming. They start to worry. We don't want them to go there. So we have the portal. That's their happy place. So now the portal can provide access to your content in the form of data, in the form of maps and apps. It does not give you a device, but it makes your data accessible on devices. And my new, obviously, favorite is Sites. Sites is brand new, and I would kind of put it in the app category, but it really is about creating those experiences. And we'll touch more on Sites in a little bit. Also within Web GIS, you have the ability to take advantage of distributed collaboration. And what distributed collaboration is all about is being able to share beyond just your organization. We've always had the ability for you to create groups, share content, and then maybe share with your whole organization or just share with everyone and enable anonymous access for whoever can hit your machines. But what about when you're working with maybe a larger organization where different departments have their own enterprise deployments, or you're working across agencies where other organizations have an enterprise or an online? How do you share easily there? Well, the answer used to be create an FTP site or drop something in Box or actually buy a hard drive and mail it and do that. I used to do that. I only messed it up once. It's a very big learning experience. Watch your drive letters. But now with distributed collaboration, that's not a problem. You don't have to worry about intern Shannon going in and accidentally deleting that terabyte of data, thinking that she was clearing the other drive. Not saying that that's what happened. But it allows, it was a very fun conversation with my manager that day. I was like, well, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining. Also, I deleted a terabyte of that really important data. I think we can get it back. No. But distributed collaboration allows you to establish trusted sharing between deployments, whether they're enterprise or online. Now, the thing to keep in mind with online is you only get one online in the mix. And the reason why, because when I first heard this too, I was like, no, I need all the onlines. I need all of them. Just give me all of them. Here's why you only get one online. Online is a multi-tenant system, and content is owned by one person at a time. It's always unique. So if I were to enter a distributed collaboration with, say, this front row here, and several of the people in the front row had online organizations, who owns the content? Who owns it? If it has the same ID, if you over here deleted it, were you the owner, or was this woman here the owner? And that becomes the challenge. So online does have the ability to invite people from different organizations to groups, and once you start thinking about it and start diagramming it out, you can start to think of, okay, here's how we make this work. But don't be surprised if you initially are met with, wait, what? But that's why, it's the multi-tenant nature of online. So here are the common patterns of use we see for distributed collaboration. We see people doing one-to-one, so maybe between one enterprise and another, or one enterprise and one online, and this works perfectly fine. We see this a lot on the enterprise to enterprise, organizations with multiple departments with their own deployments, and on the enterprise to online, it's usually a single organization that uses enterprise for their internal secure stuff, but has online for public access. So they'll clean up some data, and then they want to easily get it out there so the public can consume it. So that's where those patterns come in. And then we see the between many. Now, in this, you could have one of these enterprises become an online if you wanted to, but you only would get one in there. And so we see this when people are either working with, we've seen global corporations do this to work with the different parts all over the world, so they have different branches. Actually, our largest and most successful one is running this pattern, and it's amazing. It's huge. Oh, I almost said that. It's very big. And then that's the main use case for that one. So let's move on to ArcGIS Enterprise sites. So sites is all about creating tailored experiences that are using your portal. It doesn't replace your portal. As the GIS professional, you will still have the portal there. And honestly, the better that you build your portal, the better and easier it is to build a site, because it just has everything going much easier. Now, don't be surprised if when you try to show, if you build a site and the first thing that you show your CIO or whoever, they go, great, this replaces that portal thing. No, this lives in the portal. If you got rid of the portal thing, you're getting rid of this thing. They work together. If you were looking at these and have ever worked with open data and you think, wow, this looks like it, it's because the two are sisters. Open data is the big sister, sites is the little sister that just come on the scene. It's the same code base from the same team, but the difference is that sites allows you to use private data, and it's in ArcGIS Online. Open data is currently, all the data needs to be open, meaning it's shared with everyone, and it's an online. Now, the open data team does have plans to have private data be used. They may rebrand, use some sites branding in there when they do it. We don't know yet. But that's currently in beta, and they plan to release that in a future release of online. But this is what you saw in the plenary, and one of the things that I think is most useful about it is just how it exposes content. When we think about the number of clicks we have to do today to get into our content, we're asking people to log in, then go click, find their group, click to actually get into the group, click on the piece of content that they need, and then click to get into it. Or we're building custom applications. And for some organizations, you don't have the luxury of hiring a developer, or if you do, you better hope that nothing's changing, because the money that brought that developer in the first place might be gone when the change is needed. So Sites really helps put this in your hands and be able to help you easily create GIS sites that are for your entire organization. Helps reduce clicks, helps expose it. I love them. But let's summarize. So remember, when you're thinking about the basics of ArcGIS Enterprise, just think 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 server roles, 4 software components, 3 turtle doves and 2 French hens, and 1 ArcGIS Enterprise in a tree. Great. Then remember that ArcGIS Enterprise is what enables spatial analysis, 3D, big data, imagery, and more. So if you're working in your own infrastructure, you want all these cool things, Enterprise is probably, it's like the plumbing in your house. You want good plumbing. Nobody doesn't want good plumbing. But it's also unfortunate that it oftentimes is not the part that like you're going to show to someone. You're not going to like keep a hole in your wall and be like, come look at my copper pipes. They are very efficient. It's a shame we live in this world where we do such cool stuff and people are like, I like this map though. And you're like, oh good, I'll take it. Okay. Deployments and upgrades can be made much easier if you use deployment automation tools. And if you're thinking, but I already have an enterprise, how do I get on this deployment automation tool track without just starting completely over? We're currently working on that. I'm working on this with the chef team on a pretty regular basis to see what we can do. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts. What's the compromise? How do we get something standardized from something that's currently probably completely custom? So it's something that we're not going to release until we test and test and test some more. But it's something that we're thinking about to try to help. Upgrades can become much easier for everyone. And remember that practically all of your data can be put into ArcGIS Enterprise. And if you find something that can't, let us know. Get on GeoNet. If no one's hearing anything on GeoNet, then email your Esri person or find me on Twitter and just tweet directly to me. I will definitely see it then. I only have 200 followers, so I'll be like, I got a tweet. Yes. I know, Kenneth Field, I don't know if any of you took the cartography mode. He just tweeted that he has 6,000 followers. I was like, dang, got to step up my game. But in the meantime, please take the survey. We do read these, every single one of them. They actually send us a report so we know, and so we get all excited. But it's also good, it helps us know how we should shape the future of the Esri User Conference. If you liked the 1-hour sessions, let us know. If you hated them, let us know. This is the first year we've tried it out. Any feedback is welcome. Some things we can't change. We can't change the temperature of the room or the mics or any of that, but we can complain to people, maybe. Okay, so with that, if anyone has any questions, I am happy to take them. Yes?
Sites are available in 10.6.1?
So the question is when a site's available, and it is 10.6.1, which is going to be released July 17th. Yes. Yes.
Geodatabase integration. So our catalog, what we use now, that's what we're going to keep using in ArcGIS Enterprise.
Yeah, you can keep using ArcGIS Catalog, and Pro has a new catalog functionality that really mirrors what was in ArcMap. So if you want to move to Pro, that same functionality is there too. Anyone else? Yes.
The 3D, since Pro can do 2D, 3D, how do you separate that out because you're operating?
So you don't have to make any decision. So you're going to publish to one of the servers that federated to your ArcGIS data, or federated as part of your enterprise deployment, and the behind the scenes, the software is going to take care of it for you. So that's the whole beauty of an ArcGIS managed system. So earlier today, Melanie Summers and I gave a publishing content from Pro to Enterprise, and one of the questions that came up was, well, can you publish, Is 3D content going to be hosted or referenced? And currently 3D content is always hosted. And that's how we handle that. So your 3D content will be hosted. ArcGIS Data Store will automatically put it in the tile cache data store, assuming you have it. If you don't have it, then it won't let you publish it.
Okay, so basically my DBA should have already configured that.
Yeah. And whenever you're configuring the ArcGIS Data Store, you have two options. There's a wizard option, which is super easy, but if command line's more your DBA speed, we do have command line as well, and that's all very well documented in our.
I'm an end user, I'm just asking about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, so they should have already taken care of that for you. If you find that you can't publish it or you can't view it, so you can't view scenes in your portal, then that's a good indication that they probably only did the relational. They can go in and they can add the tile cache either on separate infrastructure if you're not planning a lot, or if you want to do it separate, so just do it on new infrastructure. So.
No, I mean, if I had already published it, then they would have to separate it.
Yes, which can be a bit challenging, but I can give you my card if you want to come up after. Anyone else?
When you're running ArcGIS sites on Enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
can you export those chartsy things that you're doing to sites?
Oh, I was hoping I would get this question. I'm going to rephrase it to my favorite phrasing. I'm going to rephrase this question to my favorite phrasing of this question is, can you get insights from insights in sites? See what I did there? And the answer is yes, once the next version of Insights is released. So they're planning on releasing in September, and I have scolded them very much so that why are you not releasing with 10.6.1? So they have gotten the feedback from me. It's more powerful coming from you, so if you guys can let the Insights team know, you need this to ship when we ship, so you don't have to wait to get insights from Insights in your sites. I was so hoping. I was like, I will put that in the planner. I will try. How many ArcGIS server sites are behind sites? However many you have in your deployment. Yeah. Yeah. We had a good one in the last session I was in too. It was like, how many points can a point cloud points? It was something. It was good. I was like, oh. Okay. Well, if there's any other questions, feel free to come up, and otherwise enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks for stopping by.